Acrylic Ink Seascape Painting, Durdle Sunset. So here we are at Durdle, and I laid a fairly large sheet of paper, 56 by 76 centimeter, on the pebbles on the shore. I am in the shadow. There is a massive cliff behind me, and I'm facing the sunset that has just happened behind the cliffs to the right. It is just lovely. I have selected the correct colors from that bucket that you see in the back there. I'm using Liquitex acrylic ink, and I added some water. I made sure that the paper is wet to start with. So whatever I will do as an initial first layer for just laying out the bulk of the composition, it will run. I really want those colors to run and spread out and just enjoy the colors interacting and react to that. So creating out in the wild is quite an intense process, because you have to react to what surrounds you, the sounds, the feeling of the wind, if there is some, seagulls, kids playing around me, potentially some water spray on the paper or myself, though in this case I was at a safe distance from the water. But essentially it is interacting with your surroundings. That's what En Plein Air is about. Reacting, interacting, noticing what surrounds you, and grabbing the most stunning details, jotting them down on the paper. I really like to work large, because these large papers I can have quite a lot of fun on them, making sure that there is smaller details, larger pieces, larger items and shapes. And as you see, some of the paper is already drying, so I'm calculating with that factor. I know that the paper is slowly drying. It's especially where there's a little bit of a wobble, a dip in the paper. I know that the water will flow there, so that will remain liquid for a longer time. But this is just part of the fun. I learned to live with whatever qualities the paper can give me, just like you allow the world around you to carry on as it is, and you just respond to that. So because these cliffs are in the shadow, the sunset was behind those cliffs, I was using a very cold pinky red to do those initial sketches. I also added, the second layer you saw was this warm green that is introducing the first complementary color pair, the red and the green. And now I'm working with this very gold yellow that is just some of those rusty looking rocks that iron oxide just seeps out of whatever upper layers contain it, and then the rain makes them run down the side of the cliffs. So as the water dries, dissipates into the paper, subsequent layers will maintain the sharpness, the crispness of those lines that you see. So I'm just using the pipette that the inks come in. Some of those bottles of inks have been diluted, but not this one. And I just want to make sure that the main elements are there. Every time you see my hand stop above the paper, it's because I stopped and I looked up to notice something new and grab whatever was the most stunning detail, and then come back to the paper and put it in there. I carry on painting with the same color until I exhaust all the places where it can go. And this is also part of the process that I developed, which means that using a lot of colors means that you can easily get lost in amongst your own colors. So I try to limit the number of colors I use. That's one thing. And the other is that I go one color at a time, and I make sure that that one color is fairly well balanced around the canvas, or the paper in this case. So this was the most, normally I would be working with a palette knife on canvas, but because the place that I wanted to go to, this Durdle, I visited it the day before, and that's when I decided, oh, I want to come back here and paint in earnest. So I did some studies on the day before, and now I came back and I knew exactly what colors I wanted to do, what scenes I wanted to capture, and I decided on the size of the paper. You have to do a bit of a hike sometimes to get to your place, the destination where you will be painting, and when you work in watercolors or acrylic inks like I do here, you will need a fairly flat surface. Now I could nestle my paper and I smoothed out the pebbles underneath before I started working. Sometimes you will be doing this on the grass, sometimes there will be a bit of a wind, so you need to look for some rocks to put on the corners, and you might need to move those rocks as you carry on working. But here it was all right. The wind didn't pick up my paper at all. It was just creating wonderful big waves that kept playing like music in the background. And the rhythm of those waves made their way into this painting as much as the seagulls, the cries of the seagulls, or the chilliness of the water. I mean, I went in there before I started painting. I took a dip in the sea, and it was quite an experience because the seashore here is very steep. These pebbles fall down at about a 30-degree angle, maybe 40, right where you want to go into the water. And that very steep angle is quite difficult to come out of, so you sort of feel, I had a bit of a scare when I thought, okay, I'm stranded here. I'm stuck in the sea, but it's just lovely. Okay, so as you see that the water has dried, and I thought actually I want some more liquid soupy patterns here, I added a bit more water. So I have this spray bottle that I carry with me, and I can just control a little bit more the speed at which some of the color patches dry or stay fluid longer. Now, what you see in my hand is a very, very sophisticated painting tool. It is a tissue paper. I just grabbed it, crunched it into a ball, and started working with it. And now that blue that I picked up, I'm going to add it onto the rock face, which is, again, as I said, it's in the shadow. So it will be more of a cool overall pattern. Now I will be eventually getting rid of the white on the paper. And also I'm aware that some of those lines are not yet dry, so I'm picking up those colors as well and patting them down back on the paper elsewhere. Now the more colors, the less vibrant and the more neutral these patches, these patterns that I am adding. So basically I'm just simulating the patterns of these pebbles that you see around the paper. You might have noticed I put this, it's just a cut-off sleeve of an old shirt that I just decided to discard, and I put this next to the paper so I would not leave any acrylic ink on the pebbles around. you might want to safeguard the environment because it's just not good. Even if it's just one drop or two, try to keep it on the paper or possibly on a painting rag. Now I'm going back to these sunlit gorgeous worms, which are in fact still part of that rusty color on the rocks, and these crisscrossing lines are in fact those zillions of cracks that I saw on the rocks. So it is a bit of a challenge that I set myself to. It's easy, it's really easy. Anybody can really fiddle a landscape to death, desperately trying to get everything realistic. Now, I would love to just grab the overall feeling of the place, and yes, pick up patterns that are that represent, so people can, people might be able to recognize, oh yeah, I know this place. But I love to make it into a little bit of like a crossword puzzle. People have to solve it. People will have patterns that will be somehow showing the patterns of real life, but I'm not going to fiddle around, and it's just not fun. For me, those artworks are quite boring when something is exactly rendered, or to be honest, you can never really outdo nature. So if you are stuck at trying to get something exactly to look exactly the way it does in real life, good luck. I don't think you can succeed. I have yet to see an artist who succeeded with that. But I want to do an abstract that is still recognizable, with some fun patterns that you can get lost on, with colors that will hopefully give you a sense of what I saw. Like here, you see some of that sunset behind being reflected on some of those waves. You see, I could easily do a meticulous rendering of various waves and their patterns and the way part of those waves are reflecting the sunlit sky or the backlit rocks. I decided to break that up and just add the colors. Now also some of the sea here and there was quite lovely turquoise, so I don't mind that yellow running into the blue. And you see me struggling a little bit with the already quite dry paper and making sure that strong yellow ink will be spreading around and behind the rocks, just like the sunset that I'm looking at. So don't forget, I keep looking up at the subject. If you just work on the canvas or the paper here, you will forget the original inspiration. And there is a point when you want to make sure that overall the painting stands on its own and without reference to reality. It will have to be a whole, a coherent piece. But at this point, I'm still picking up inspirations and making sure that I fill the paper in a way that represents the scene. I have to say that looking back now, this is the second time that I rewatched this video. The first time I was just looking at it and seeing what would I be telling you about it, the creative process, because this being a voiceover. When I hold classes and workshops, I usually paint and explain my choices at the same time when I just do the demo painting. And then we interact and I ask students to show their pieces. But that means that it will be a lot slower. It won't be a 15-20 minute video. It will be a much longer process, but you can also paint alongside. So I encourage you to perhaps rewatch this and do something similar. If you have acrylic inks, don't be too caught up on what brand you are using, just use the one that is available in your area. I encourage you to support local art materials, artist shops, and learn to use the materials that you have. Now, I've been using acrylic inks for, let me see, I don't know, 5 years now. So I have collected quite a few bottles, and I even mix my own colors. But if you can just start with 2 bottles of ink and start including that into your painting process, or start sketching with it, just see how inks behave, how you like them. You might set them aside. Why waste a lot of money on a full set of, I don't know, tens of different colors if you might not like it. Acrylic inks, they are very strong. They are full of pigments. So it's a lot easier to layer very thin, gentle colors in watercolors. When you work with inks, it's like flying a fighter plane. You just cannot slow down. There is a certain speed and there is a certain strength that you have to command. So acrylic inks are full of pigments, and if you start spraying them, they will be all over your painting. You see, I switched to a very basic brush, wide brush, and because I think nobody helped me to get, or maybe I didn't pick up a bottle of water there, I'm just spraying the brush itself, so that one little spray bottle has multiple uses. And now I will be spreading some of those colors, because it's a lot of crisscross and the scene itself wasn't so sharp and jagged all over. So I'm going to let some of those colors run into each other, and every time you see my brush in the air stopping, I keep looking back up at the scene and see where are those dark shadows, where are those main details that are striking and that are missing from the paper as I lifted up my eyes. So every time I go back, there is something new that I picked up from the scene, from the original inspiration. I need to somehow get rid of all those whites, because there is a lot of dark shadow, and otherwise the sunlight or the sunset behind the backlit rocks are not going to stand out if it all remains white. So I will have to get rid of the white, and some of the paper is already dry, so inks also have this characteristic that once they dry, you can't really move them. With watercolors, if you add water to an already dry painting, it's gonna run. All those pigments come up, they become loose again, and you can move them around. With inks, it's quite different. So it looks like you can move them around like watercolor, but only while they are still wet. And also they are a lot stronger, so a lot more pigmented. I love strong colors, but I warn you, you have seen that sometimes those very, very thin lines contain so much pigment that if you spray them, then they fill a considerable patch on the paper with a strong pigmented color. So yeah, now this was about the time when I decided that, okay, yeah, I will need to have all those dark shadows, the cracks placed in there. And then when I get back home, it was getting a bit cold, dark. People went home from the beach. So by the time I packed up, it was quite empty, which is not bad. But I was aware that all these colors will need to dry before I can roll up the paper and hike back up to the car. So I keep looking back. What else? What else? When you get to that stage and you keep asking yourself, okay, what else do I need here? You might want to stop. So I encourage you to possibly go back to the same place another day and finish the painting. Think about your choices, the decisions, design decisions, color decisions. It is really, the more you think, the more time you take to look at the subject and consider those decisions, the better your artwork will be. So time spent with the brush in the air and not doing anything is time spent well. And that is time spent working, because you are essentially painting with your mind, you are painting with your heart. Your hand is as much of a tool as the colors that you use. So I really like to think, and I paint when I know what I want to paint. Now this is the time when I go back to the rag. At this point I'm using that rag to spread more of that abstract pattern around, to create an impression of those pebbles. And also I'm lifting some of those colors from the rock face, and you see the patterns that I come up with. So while the inks are still wet, you can lift some of them. You can lighten them up. Once they dry, you can just paint over them. You can go on top of this with proper acrylics, not inks or new inks. There are white inks. You can knock back some of the patterns. I recommend that once you start experimenting with a medium, don't give up on this after making one terrible, disastrous paper. In fact, I promise, don't be afraid of that. I promise your first painting with acrylic inks will be a disaster, as it should be, because it is essentially just a learning curve of the kind of, the way the medium behaves. It's like potentially when you are meeting somebody for the first time, more often than not, you cannot make the decision whether or not you want to marry them. Now this is similar. You have to get to know the medium before you decide that you want to carry on working with it again and again and again. But that means that you have to have a certain mileage in your hand. You have to have a certain amount of disaster canvases or papers that where you learned the kind of mark making that the medium allows and the tools that you use to apply that medium. So what are the tools you can use? You can use your fingers, you can use sponges, you can use tissue paper, bubble wrap, cling wrap, whatever. You can use pebbles, you can use a lot of different materials to move the pigment around, bearing in mind how quickly it dries, what happens when it dries, what you can put on top of the other. So there it just caught my eyes. Oh, the yellow needs to run a little bit more. So I picked up the spray bottle and I went back there. And I can't be bothered to pick up, possibly my rag was dirty at this point, so I just decided to use my fingers. And I had a small bag of baby wipes with me to clean my fingers afterwards. So you see, it is getting quite muddy, and as much as it was wild and strong and bold colors initially, the more those colors run together, the more you have a variety of vibrancy. Now let's see how I got on. And that's the original scenery. So of course it was all changing while I was painting. It started with a very bold, strong yellow behind those rocks. By now those clouds came back, or they just started blocking the background, that sunny sunset, and it's just fun. Thank you for watching, and if you would like to watch more, please subscribe And I appreciate a thumbs up if you liked it.